Hello everybody and welcome to week 9 of the UFL season, and at this point with 2 weeks left to play, the playoffs are completely set in stone. So now at this point we're going to be figuring out between the playoff teams and the non-playoff teams where they rank in their little pockets there. So if you're new, subscribe, it would be greatly appreciated. We're trying to get to 500 by the end of the year, and honestly ideally if we get to 500 by the start of the NFL season, that would be perfect as well. So subscribe, leave a like, comment down below your own thoughts on everything for the UFL in week 9. Let's get right into it. Number 8 is the San Antonio Brahmas, and that was a tough one for the Brahmas. A game that should have been won handedly, instead was a crushing overtime loss, in large part thanks to the offense not being able to get out of their own way. Kevin Hogan was under 100 yards passing, and he threw 3 interceptions, including one inside the 10. Jayshon Corbin played his best game of the season with 142 yards and 25 carries, and he had a touchdown, but it was all for naught. Steven Solanos had the lone touchdown pass in this one on a tight end pass trick play, and the defense gave them plenty of chances in this one, but it was a defense that didn't play great, but still played well enough for the win. 3 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and only gave up 36 passing yards. They firmly beat Memphis on the stat sheet, having 10 more minutes of time of possession, 120 more yards, and 9 more first downs, but they just couldn't get out of their own way, and it cost them in this one an overtime loss. Really devastating. They come in at number 8. Number 7 is the Memphis Showboats, and this was a game that Memphis should not have won by any means, but they made the plays when they needed to in order to get the job done. They picked off Kevin Hogan 3 times, they sacked him twice, and they really locked it down during overtime. Meanwhile, the offense was a massive disappointment with Troy Williams behind center. They had a measly 36 passing yards in this game offensively, and just was not a good showing. But the combination of Jalen Jackson and Deneric Prince combined for 120 yards and a touchdown, as now both of Memphis' wins this season have come in overtime, but they were also both completely different games by Memphis. This one was just them being able to capitalize on the mistakes of San Antonio and doing just enough when the lights were brightest in overtime to escape with a 2-point win, as they are now at the point of the season where the coaches are trying to figure out who from this year's roster will be on next year's roster. Going to be a weird test to figure that out, especially at the quarterback spot. I'm not expecting Troy Williams to play the rest of the season, but that will be a discussion for predictions. But yeah, Memphis comes in at number 7. Number 6 is the Houston Roughnecks. They needed a win to keep their playoff hopes alive, and it just didn't work out for them. McClendon played fine with 60% completion for 316 yards and 2 touchdowns. The one interception he threw was a pick 6, which really did hurt them in this game. The ground game also played well, having 125 yards on the day between Zaquandre White, Lorenzo Lingard, and Jalen McClendon. The defense did their best, but in the end, they struggled against Michigan while they were being led by backup Danny Etling. They did fine enough against the ground with both McCrary and Toa having slightly above average days with 4.5 and 3.8 yards per carry respectively. Houston controlled yardages and time of possession, but they lost a turnover battle 2-0 in a game where every single drive mattered. Losing a turnover battle was going to cost them in this one. But again, this was a team that overperformed expectations this year, so it is still a very solid season for Houston, as it does seem like they have their quarterback of the future in Jalen McClendon, and they have a roster that can really be built upon to try and make a good playoff push next year. They come in at number 6. Number 5 is the Arlington Renegades. And why do I feel like every single Arlington loss this season can be summed up with one play that just didn't go their way, either through means that they've caused or just straight up bad luck. It was a fantastic game for Arlington in this one, another shootout against DC that came down to the wire, but for as good as Luis Perez was in this game, he had 350 yards and 2 touchdowns. According to Bob Stoops, he called his own number with that fake spike and threw the game-sealing interception in just a mind-bafflingly bad play call at the end there. Not sure why he thought that was going to work, but just not a decision you want to make. And again, it was a case where this was a great game. Tyler Vaughn played well, had 2 touchdown grabs. Holden Ahlers had his first touchdown since his East Carolina University days with the lone rushing touchdown on the day for Arlington. But they struggled against DC's offense. They gave up 33 points and a 3-point loss in a game where you absolutely had to win. Plus had over 13 minutes of time of possession advantage. A really tough loss for Arlington. They stick at number 5 because of it. Number 4 is the Birmingham Stallions. And even though they lost this game, they have punched their ticket to the playoffs for the 4th straight year, thanks to the Houston loss to Michigan. But they still played a really hard-fought game in this one on the road in St. Louis that came down to an uncharacteristic mistake by C.J. Marable. J'Mar Smith in his first start since 2023 played pretty well, 262 yards and 3 touchdowns on 52% completion, and he was a part of the ground trio alongside C.J. Marable and Ricky Person that combined for 124 yards on the ground. Deon Cain in his 2 receptions had 2 touchdowns and played really well. The defense also played well. They made St. Louis look sluggish in this game the majority of the time, except on that final drive for St. Louis where they took the lead. But for the most part, it was a really solid showing for Birmingham as they're looking to just get to the playoffs and be somewhat healthy. It does seem like they're getting Alex McGough back next week. I know I've been saying that quite a bit the past few weeks, but now it definitely does seem that way. We'll see if he'll get the start and how much he'll actually play. But it's been a very, very, very QB heavy season for Birmingham. A lot of different guys making starts there. And if Alex McGough can come back and make his first start since week 1, right before the playoffs, it will line up perfectly. The Stallions come in at number 4. Number 3 is the St. Louis Battlehawks. And it wasn't the prettiest of showings, but they got the win and clinched a playoff spot for the 2nd year in a row on the back of Jacob Sailors, who finally had another truly fantastic showing, 118 yards and a touchdown. Max Duggan also had a solid showing on the ground, 54 yards and the first 2 touchdowns of the day for St. Louis. But through the air, it was a tough watch, just over 100 yards and on 12 for 21 completion. The defense, though, really stepped up, played well and forced 3 turnovers, including the pick 6 and the game-winning forced fumble. The defense also held Birmingham to 0 for 2 in the red zone, compared to St. Louis being a perfect 3 for 3 against one of the top red zone defenses in the league. They also sacked J'Mar Smith 4 times in the win, and it was a really solid showing that was a hard-fought St. Louis style win. At the end of the day, the Battlehawks are now firmly in the playoffs, and they're going to be getting a home playoff game no matter what. In St. Louis, it's going to be a fantastic watch against DC when that rolls around. But yeah, the Battlehawks come in at number 3. Number 2 is the DC Defenders. And that was a win that was very similar to the first meeting between these 2 teams, as it was a shootout that came down to the wire. Jordan Ta'amu played well with 240 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air, and a 9-yard touchdown reception on some trickery. Cornell Powell had a solid showing receiving-wise with 60 yards and 2 touchdowns. Deion Jackson ran well with just about 90 yards and the first touchdown of the game. The defense struggled against Perez. They allowed 350 yards, but they made a play late and sealed it with the interception by former first-round pick DeAndre Baker. Just all around, it was a win that clinched a playoff spot for both DC and St. Louis, meaning we're going to have back-to-back Week 10 and the XFL Conference Championship, or both DC versus St. Louis. Going to be a fantastic watch. And for as much as I want to say that the Week 10 matchup will be for the home field and the 1 seed, it was announced that DC is not going to be able to play a home playoff game, nor would it technically be neutral site, as the game will be in St. Louis. But there's so much more I can say about that in the future when we get to playoff time. For now, DC stays at number 2. And number 1 remains the Michigan Panthers. The Panthers are playoff bound. They are conference championship bound for back-to-back seasons, thanks to the effort by backup Danny Edling, as it was a very sudden start for him, as Bryce Perkins was a game-time decision that no one told us about, apparently. Edling threw well, though, to a tune of 165 yards and 3 touchdowns. He looked much more confident in this one compared to some of the moments he had earlier on in the season. The ground game took a decline from weeks prior, but still played fine. The defense got the job done, holding Houston to 18 points and getting on the board themselves with a pick 6 by Kenai Lovely. Michigan is a top team in the league, and it showed. It's a different team than what they had last year. And in the last year's UFL Conference Championship, they played really poorly. They have a chance for revenge this year as they're set to play Birmingham. And much like the case with DC, I feel bad for the Panthers, as that game will not be in a neutral site, nor in Ford Field. It's going to be in Birmingham due to scheduling conflicts. But so much like the case with DC, I'll talk a lot more about that when we get to the conference championship games. For now, though, Michigan remains my favorite team, especially if Bryce Perkins can get back soon and be healthy. Not fully certain why he missed this game, but Danny Edling played fine in the absence of Bryce Perkins. They come in at number 1. Well, there you have it. Power rankings for week 9. Quick little rundown. Brahmas at 8, Showboats at 7, Roughnecks at 6, Renegades at 5, Stallions at 4, Battlehawks at 3, Defenders at 2, and the Panthers round things out once again at number 1. Thank you all for tuning in. I'll see you all next time for predictions. Have yourselves a damn good one. Peace.